Hi, everyone. Jared here. And tomorrow we'll be starting a new book of the Bible, the book of Ephesians. Now, with the Gospel of Matthew, Darren and I kind of took turns. I did one day, he'd do another day. For some of the larger books, that's what we'll do. For some of the shorter books like Ephesians, which is only 6 chapters, one of us will just take the whole book. So for the next 6 reading days, I'll be leading us through the book of Ephesians. It's an amazing book. I'm super excited about it. In my house, I've compiled a list of passages that I want to memorize and that I want to share with my kids to memorize and to know as they grow up. And I made this massive list one day. And I looked back at it. I included 4 whole chapters of Ephesians. That's probably really ambitious. But I tell you that just to let you know, this book is amazing. There's so many good things, and I'm excited about it. So before we dive in tomorrow, I want to give you just a bit of a bird's eye view to see a few things to be looking for as you walk through this book. There are 2 broad themes to keep an eye on. Traditionally, the first half of Ephesians is teaching about what God has done, specifically what God has done in the work and in the life of Jesus Christ. Paul is telling the church in Ephesus and surrounding churches and us today, he's saying, look at all the amazing things about the work of God the Father, and look at all the amazing things about his son, Jesus. And he's saying, believe this, or if you already believe, remember this, remember how good this is, and that this is true. Then the second half of the book focuses on how people, churches, how individuals, and how families are called to live in light of what Jesus Christ has done. So theme 1, we're looking for the teachings about the good news of Jesus and the implications of what Jesus has done for the world. And then theme 2 is, because of all these amazing things about Jesus, you are now called to live in a certain way. Now that's a broad and maybe oversimplified overview, but it hopefully gives us a decent framework as we read. For theme 2, how to live as a follower of Jesus, Paul is going to use this metaphor of walking. In Ephesians 2, he'll explain this good news of grace and salvation that people find in Christ, and then he'll say that we are made for good work and that we should walk in these good works. At the beginning of Ephesians 4, Paul will say, therefore, because of all that Christ has done, I now urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called. Later in chapter 4, he'll say that if you are following Jesus, you must no longer walk these other ways that you used to walk. But now you need to walk in this new way, in this new path. Walking is a common metaphor used in the scriptures for how we are to live. Christians were called people of the way, meaning people who walk on a certain path where they follow Jesus and his way to live. Consistently throughout the whole scriptures, God rescues, God saves, God helps, and then he calls the people he's rescued to walk in a new way. God pulls people out of an old way of living. He sets people free, and then he says, here is the path. Here is the new way to walk. God does this with Abraham in the book of Genesis. He says, get up and leave your old life and start walking to a land I'll show you. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, God delivers his people from slavery, and then he calls them to walk out of slavery and walk into a new promised land. God will say to his people, I've rescued you, and I'm moving you to the promised land. Here is the way you are to walk as you are to move into this new life. You are to walk this certain way and teach your children and one another to follow my commandments as you walk around in your life. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, in the book we just read in Matthew at Branch Together, teaches a new way to live as members of God's kingdom. At the end of this sermon, he'll say, walk this narrow path that leads to life, and don't walk this broad path over here that leads to destruction. Paul is in the tradition of all of these stories and all of these themes that are working throughout the Bible. So Paul will say in his book of Ephesians, here is the way to walk. Because of God's great love and his salvation for us, here is the new way to walk. So as we read, pay attention when you see phrases like way of life or the way you should walk, or phrases like that. And I'll point them out to you too. Over the next 8 days, so over the next 6 chapters and the weekend, think about the path you are on. Think about the way you're walking in your own life. As you hear about the good news of Jesus, consider where you might need to change your path. Are you on some wrong paths? Do you need to switch paths? Or maybe you're walking in the right direction, but you stumble a lot. Let Paul's letter remind you of the amazing things Jesus has done for the world, and let the letter teach you how to better walk on this path of following Jesus and living in his kingdom.